Tell me your name, please, and how long you were married.
My name's Cynthia Schwarzkopf, and I was married about 5 years.
Why did you choose collaborative divorce?
I'm no spring chicken, and in my 40s, I unfortunately have had countless friends who have gone through divorces, and they've been ugly and they've been long, and I've seen what happens when two very adversarial parties combine with two adversarial attorneys, how awful that can be.
Your father was a very famous general, Norman Schwarzkopf. What would he think of collaborative divorce?
Well, a lot of people like to think of generals as war hungry and ready to press the big red button, but in truth, my father was very much a let's talk about it, let's employ diplomacy, let's employ a strategy to keep the peace. And war should be the absolute last alternative because of the ugly nature of it. Collaborative law gave us an opportunity to have those discussions and discuss strategy and come up with a plan that kept us from ultimately going to war.
What was your emotional state at the beginning of this process?
It was awful. I was at a terrible low and had never in my entire life anticipated that I'd even have to be considering divorce. Divorce is nowhere in my family. I was the first. I felt like I was failing.
As the mother of a small child, what was collaborative divorce like?
Every single aspect of my divorce that was concerning for me pales in comparison to my concerns about my son. Excuse me. While it was terribly difficult determining that I was going to need to share custody of my child with somebody I was no longer married to or spend time away from him. I mean, face it, you're going into a divorce and you don't want to not be married and have a nuclear family anymore, and you're looking forward while you're getting divorced and you're saying to yourself, you know, maybe I'm not going to have all the Christmases with my child. And you have all of these concerns, and those concerns are shared by both parents. They're both worried about those things, and I very much was. I know that if I had walked into court, the judge's function is to execute the law, right? And I can't tell you exactly what that law is and exactly how that would have worked out, but I can tell you that it was extremely comforting to me to be able to walk into a child advocate who's working in the best interest of my child, which is my number one concern, and know that his best interest is being taken to heart. So you get to discuss what's best. What are both parents' work schedules? Is the child performing in school in a way that's okay to have overnight visits on a school, night, or is that disruptive? What do vacations look like? What do summers look like? I think it ends up being a lot more flexible because both parents' lives and desires and concerns are being able to take into consideration. You don't get that kind of time in court to express all those things. Having the opportunity to go through a collaborative divorce gave me a much, much more specific parenting plan. As I indicated earlier in our discussion, one of my greatest concerns, I just didn't like being away from my child. Even for a day, it was very unnatural for me to think that I would go 24 hours without seeing him or him being away. We were able to adopt into our parenting plan that we make an effort every night to have our child contact the other parent to say goodnight. Great for the child, great for my son, and great for me when he's away, just to know that he's getting ready to go to sleep, that he's safe and sound. It gives me a tremendous amount of peace of mind.
How do you think the divorce would have been different had it played out in a courtroom?
I actually shudder to think of what could have potentially happened going before somebody who didn't know me, didn't know my ex-husband, didn't know the nature of my child or any of those things, who with a caseload this high on their table would have to make decisions about how my future was going to function. So I have no idea, and I don't want to know what the difference would have been because that scares me.
As General Schwarzkopf's daughter, was privacy important to you?
Yeah, extremely. I just have a last name that sometimes draws attention or adds a little bit additional scrutiny. I've seen that countless times over the last 20 years of my life, and I didn't want the private nature of my life being exposed publicly in any way. Collaborative divorce gave us an opportunity to do that. Minimal amount of information being exposed publicly. For the last 20 plus years of my life, we've, as a family, have lived a fairly public life, and inadvertently, even though a lot of time's gone by since we were extremely public, you never know what people are going to grab onto. The last thing that I wanted was the most uncomfortable and difficult part of my life be exposed publicly. So in as much as I could protect my privacy, I wanted to do that.
In collaborative divorce, you have a mental health facilitator and a financial expert in the room with you. What was that like?
There's something to be said about sitting around a table together with mediators and advisors in place and being able to communicate to one another what your intentions are moving forward, what your intentions are through the divorce process. I don't think anything gets lost in translations through letters and correspondence and all of those other ways that divorces normally take place. You may not agree, and I can tell you that on countless times we did not, and the table got a little hot sometimes and a little bit uncomfortable, but at the end of the day we were able to shake hands and do it in person and come up with a plan we felt would be effective moving forward and in ending our marriage.
What were some of the drawbacks of collaborative divorce?
I think that there are ways in a conventional divorce process, if parties are generally in agreement, to keep a divorce fairly inexpensive. They're offered out there all over the place. When you start in the collaborative process, bringing in additional professionals that are required in the process, like a child advocate and like the financial advisory aspect and multiple attorneys in a room, it can feel very expensive for those particular meetings. But collaborative law is also a process that can just take a couple meetings as a collective and you can be finalized if everyone is on the same page. While the process is generally expensive by nature, depending on where you stand in agreement or disagreement with one another, it can be a whole lot less expensive than a litigation approach. For me, I would have to say that collaborative law ended up being more financially beneficial and you get a whole lot more out of it for what you're paying. It wasn't always easy, but there were moments of agreement and there were moments of collaboration that I don't think that we would have had if we had hired two litigating attorneys to communicate on our behalves via letter and long delays. I think that we would have just increased our paranoia and anger at one another. I think we made the right choice. Gives you a chance to move forward. Had we gone any other way other than collaborative, I can't tell you that this far out we would be done. So it gives you a chance to kind of move forward with the next phase of your life post-divorce.
What is that next phase of life for you?
Getting past divorce, you're so focused on the divorce. Really moving forward for me just means in this new, not so conventional family structure that we have, raising a happy, healthy child. 20 years of business behind me, I have the opportunity now to really focus on that, and that's my number one goal, and that's where we are.